Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bilal al Issa. I am a Palestinian living in Denmark. I would like to thank you for having me here with you today. And thanks to Rap Politics and Shuruk for this incredible project, Pieces of Palestine. And in relation to that, I would like to give a little presentation about symbols and icons in the Palestinian struggle. I could speak about it for so many hours, but I will try to compromise it and to give picture about the background of the Palestinian identity, how it have developed with the symbols and the icons that the Palestinians got and developed throughout the years. Um, to start with, I would like to give you a little background from 1948 till today about what have happened with the Palestinians in terms of building and creating their own identity. We have seen after the Nakba and the catastrophe and the displacement of the Palestinians in 1948, it was basically half of the Palestinians, about 800,000 Palestinians, they got forced out of their homes and displaced in the neighboring countries in Lebanon, in Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and so on. And today we have Palestinians all over the world. Um, at that time, the Palestinians were really in shock. They were recently displaced. They didn't know what to do. There were no political leadership from the Palestinians, also because that the Palestinian leadership before was also very marginalized because of the the British colony in before 1948. So the identity of the Palestinian was actually based on of the Arab narrative about the Palestinians, that they were really poor, they were living in refugee camps, and they were like very helpless and very dependent on the UNRWA. This period from 1948 to 1967 was like a walk in a desert for the Palestinians, which was very awful. In 1967, the Palestinians started to organize themselves. The first political parties were founded. Fatah was the first party, and then came the PFLP 2 years after the BFLP, the DFLP, sorry, and the Arab Liberation Front in 1969. So it was actually the first time that the Palestinians started to form their own leadership. They started to build an identity, and a very remarkable quote that actually showed it was a quote by Yasser Arafat in 1967, where he said in a TV interview that we were refugees and we became fighters for freedom. It was actually a remark that we will not stay to be the poor refugees who are helpless. We want to change the status quo of ourselves and fight for and build a national liberation movement in order to regain our freedom. So at this time, the Palestinian identity started to be from a helpless refugee to a revolutionary that who is fighting for freedom. How did it happen? It was many ways that it happened. The first thing was through the organizations, the fractions that were built, created at that time, Fatah, PFLP, and the other organizations. They had the military fraction. It was very obvious that the military fractions gives the identity that now the Palestinians want to regain their freedom through the armed struggle, and in this way they created this identity about that the Palestinian is becoming as a freedom fighter. They, a Palestinian have a purpose in his life, or in her life, and it's actually to fight for the freedom and the liberation of the homeland. Inside these fractions, these parties, Palestinian parties, it was not only compromised by military fractions. There were also like buildings and projects and programs for the youth and for the next generation to build it up and to build their identity in this way. It was mainly through scouts, where Palestinian children, actually boys and girls, many of them they joined the scouts, especially in the refugee camps, where they started to get educated about the purpose of their life, the purpose of the Palestinian struggle, the purpose of how to be aware of their own identity. Another thing is also the social departments. All Palestinian fractions had social departments because they got funding from abroad, from different channels from abroad, and they started actually to have these social departments in order to support each other in the camps. If somebody were in trouble or were very poor, or for example needed a surgery that is very vital for a person's life, these military fractions they started actually these fractions they started to um, give like funds to help people out, and in this way they created the loyalty from the people to these different parties. Another thing is actually art and culture. It was mainly implemented in under the Scouts, but also the social departments. The art and culture for the Palestinians was very, very important for the Palestinians, especially because that was a way to create the Palestinian identity, to create the symbols, to create the icons that have meant a lot for the Palestinians throughout the years, and I will go into them in the coming chapters. In one of the ways in art and culture, Palestinians had like were very known in literature. We had as Palestinians some profiles, authors, poets, and people who wrote lyrics, editors like Ghassan Kanafani, Ibrahim Toukan before Ghassan, Mahmoud Darwish, Edward Said. And actually, for example, these four profiles of persons, they became one of some of the most important personalities in the Arab world, actually. And I will present them and give a little background story about them, because it was actually also a way to develop the Palestinian culture itself. For example, for the first person I want to highlight is Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan Kanafani was born in Haifa. He was actually married to a Danish woman called Annie Kanafani, who is living in Lebanon and have projects, the Ghassan Kanafani Foundation in Ain al-Hilwe in Lebanon. Ghassan, he was one of the most important persons in the Palestinian struggle. He was actually a novelist, he was an author, he was a spokesman of the PFLP, the Palestinian Fraction or Party, and he was also an editor in the magazine or the newspaper called Al Hadaf. And he was actually assassinated in Lebanon while he was with his niece in the car. It was the Israeli intelligence Mossad who actually assassinated him, and he was only 36 years old. In this short life that he had, he became one of the greatest and the most important persons in the Palestinian struggle. He made some remarkable things through his literature, and I have also some of his quotes. There are many other very important quotes and novels that are being actually taught in the schools in Palestine and outside Palestine. Another profile that we have is Mahmoud Darwish. Mahmoud Darwish, he was actually also one of the most important poets in the Arab world. He was Palestinian, born in El-Birwi, and he became also like a he became also as a political activist for Palestine, and he was actually the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence for Palestine that Yasser Arafat he read in and declared in Algeria in 1988. So he became also a very important figure in the Palestinian struggle. And what also made him very famous was actually his way in presenting, in his way of appearance himself. And I would like to show you a little video that where he reads one of his most famous poems, and there will also be an English translation of this poem. So I will leave you with this one. Enjoy.
على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. تردد إبريل، رائحة الخبز في الفجر، تعويذة امرأة للرجال. كتابات أسخيليوس، أول الحب، عشب على حجر. أمهات يقفن على خيط نايم، وخوف الغزاة من الذكريات. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. نهاية أيلول، سيدة تترك 40 بكامل مشمشها. ساعة الشمس في السجن، غيم يقلد سربا من الكائنات. هتافات شعب لمن يصعدون إلى حتفهم باسمين، وخوف الطغاة من الأغنيات. على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. على هذه الأرض سيدة الأرض، أم البدايات، أم النهايات. كانت تسمى فلسطين، صارت تسمى فلسطين. سيدتي، أستحق لأنك سيدتي، أستحق الحياة.
This was some of the personalities that I would like to highlight, and we have also another thing. What comes from literature is actually music. What comes from lyrics, and the lyrics that we have had and the music that was being made during the Palestinian struggle from 1967 until today was actually mainly folk songs for the Palestinians. It was folk songs repeated for generations and actually until today. And it was actually folk songs that have been also taught in the Palestinian schools and the UNRWA schools, and also in the different Palestinian parties and fractions through the scouts for the children and so on. The songs were very characterized like as revolutionary songs. It was songs that are talking about the love for the homeland, and that brings back memories from Palestine before 48, and at the same time also gives the hope for the Palestinians to return to the land and to gain their own freedom. Um, these songs are we see them still today. We see them also in, for example, Palestinian weddings or Palestinian cultural events, cultural festivals, and they are still being repeated inside and outside Palestine. It was not only the Palestinians who made songs about Palestine. We saw also legendary Arabic artists that who made songs for Palestine that are still very popular today. We know Fairuz, the Lebanese singer who made several songs about Palestine, and one of the most famous songs is Zahrat al-Madain, the flower of all cities, where she sings about Jerusalem. We have also songs from Marcel Khalife, from Ahmed Kabour, that are still being repeated until today, and it's very important to the Palestinian memory. And in this way, we also see some Arabic artists and non-Palestinian artists actually contributing to building the Palestinian identity and to building the Palestinian culture and making symbols. We also see like other alternative Arabic music. There's actually a big scene also between non-Arabic music where they sing about Palestine. We have seen, for example, Tupac. We have seen Loki, Loop Fiasco. We have also seen like some Danish names, Danish artists singing about Palestine. For example, Outlandish, Hampton Lange. We have seen Per Vers, for example, Raskeping. Marwan, who is originally Palestinian and a very famous rapper here in Denmark. But this shows that actually Palestine and the symbol about Palestine was, and throughout the years it was developed until a symbol of freedom, a symbol of struggle. And this is coming from actually the Palestinian symbols and the identity that have been built since 1967 till today, where Palestine by the pro-Palestinian communities is being linked to fighters, freedom fighters, revolution, and so on, which is actually very popular among the pro-Palestinian communities and the leftist communities in the world. I would like to also, in this case, show you a song that is actually an old song. It was a song made before 1948. It was made by, the lyrics were written by Ibrahim Toukan, and it's called Mawtini. I will show you this song and talk a little bit about it afterwards. Enjoy.
وعيشنا المنكدة ظلمنا المؤبدة وعيشنا المنكدة لا نريد لن نعيد لسنا كريم لسنا
Welcome back. The reason why I showed this song is actually to give you a little idea about which kind of songs, which kind of lyrics there is. And sorry, I have a parrot here. And also which kind of descriptions is being described when you talk about Palestine. And it's very obvious that that this song Mautini is a very famous song. It's being people sing it in demonstrations, in cultural events, in normal events, especially in Palestine. And it's also like it have also become like a song that is more about like a more global or universal. For example, in Iraq, it's actually adopted as the national anthem of Iraq. Besides that, we have also the street art. The street art is a very important tool for the Palestinians, especially recently throughout the years, but especially after the apartheid wall have been built in 2005-6. We have seen many artists around the world coming. We have also seen Palestinians artists painting on this wall and painting other places. But one of the most famous artists who have paint on the wall and paint other places in Palestine is Banksy, the British artist. We have, for example, this guy, this paint where a fighter he throws a bunch of flowers. We have also this one with Morgan Freeman. We have also this one where Trump and Netanyahu are kissing. We have many street arts from Banksy that also have been become icons for the Palestinian struggle. We have also seen a very famous one. It's like a piece of flying with a bulletproof on it. So, but it's not only Banksy who have been in Palestine. He is one of the most famous persons who have made art about Palestine to support the Palestinian struggle. But we have also, for example, from Denmark, Husk Mit Navn, that's his name, remember my name. He have been in Palestine in 2012. It was actually he was actually invited from the Danish house in Palestine, where we invited him to Palestine, and he made arts in different places in the West Bank together with local Palestinian artists. And many of these arts, you can still see them today in Hebron, in Ramallah, in Qalandia, Izari, and other places as well. and here we can see some of the remarkable and very well-known street arts that we can see on the apartheid wall. This one you can see it in Bethlehem, Make Hummus Not Walls. We have seen also these different arts. Basically, it's a place filled with arts, and there have been many discussions about between the Palestinian inside the Palestinian community about is it clever? Should we do it? Why shouldn't we do it? But if we go to Bethlehem, we can see so many arts. But we can go to other places, for example, in Shafat, near Jerusalem, where you will not see any painting on the wall. And this is because that the local community there, they said that like we don't want to paint or make arts on this wall. It shouldn't look pretty. We just want to let it stay ugly and cold as it is, so people can see or give a kind of an impression that we are not enjoying this. Unfortunately, in Bethlehem, people go, and I personally understand it because people go to Bethlehem to see these arts. It's important arts, it's arts that have been well known and going worldwide, but we have also seen tourists go there, and sometimes people also forget the impact of this apartheid wall, what it makes to the local community in Palestine. And this is also something ethical to think about or take a stand about. I don't want to say that who is doing something wrong, but everybody have their own reasons, and I think there's pros and cons in both things. Another icon, very important symbol that the Palestinians have is Hamdallah. It's a signature, this picture that you can see, it's actually a signature for a cartoon drawer, a cartoonist called Najil Ali. He was being assassinated in Britain in 1967, I think, or 60. Now it's 1978, I think. And he was a very important cartoonist. His cartoons, like I would first like to speak about Hamdallah. Hamdallah, he is a little refugee kid, boy, who is actually having his hands back and looking at the world and just like looking at on what's happening in the world. And this is actually a signature that Najil Ali had in all of his cartoons. I will send you a link. I will share with you a link where you can see all of the cartoons of Najil Ali. It's actually cartoons that are describing the leadership, the political situation, the humanitarian situation from a Palestinian perspective, and it shows how a Palestinian kid or a Palestinian is looking at the world in terms of what's happening. The cartoons were characterized as very satiric, ironic, actually making fun of the Arab leadership, the Palestinian leaderships as well, and criticizing them if they did something wrong or if some political decisions that have been made, Najil Ali didn't agree with them. Actually, Najil Ali, he also commented on this boy, Hamdallah, and he described him as that's a little kid, he's a refugee. You can see in his clothes that it's not clean, it's very dirty, and that there's a little badge on his clothes, on his shirt. And you can see also his hair is very spiky, and it shows that it's a very poor refugee kid, who is a kid who is a refugee. And Najil Ali, he actually said like people asked him, why can't we see the face of this kid? And Najil Ali, he actually said that he will publish and make the face of this child once Palestine is being liberated. Then the child will turn around and show his face. Unfortunately, it have not happened, and yeah, Najal Ali, he is dead. People don't know actually who killed him. Some say that it's actually Israel, and others say that he have been assassinated by the Palestinian leadership, but nobody knows anything about it yet. There have not been any conclusion about this case. But for the Palestinian struggle, this kid is very important. It's a cartoon that is being used over and over again throughout the years, and basically many of the Palestinians, they know who Handala is, and they see him as a very important person in this struggle and also in the cultural life of Palestine. Other symbols that we have is actually the key that I would like to highlight. The key is actually a symbol of return, the key of return. It actually shows that the Palestinians developed the key. The meaning of the key is actually that the Palestinians, when they were displaced and forced out of their homes in 1948, they remained having this key, and this is actually the key to their homes in Palestine. And this shows that they are determined to return back to their home in Palestine. And actually this key, which is a symbol of the return, it's something that many families give like to their children and to the next generations in order not to forget Palestine and not to forget the purpose of their life. This key is also being used very much in artistic expressions and artistic work. We can see in this in this picture, we can see how a hand holds it. We can see the old lady who is going to a demonstration and holds it, and we can see in the left hand, in the right hand side, in the picture to the right, it's actually the gate of the refugee camp Aida, which is located in Bethlehem, Aida camp. And this is actually the main gate where you enter the refugee camp. And this shows also that it is a refugee camp. It will stay as a refugee camp. And the refugees who are living there, they will still remain and be determined to keep their right of return, which is very important from the Palestinian struggle, because all of the Palestinian struggle is basically the return for the people back to their home and get their own freedom and the right of movement in their own homeland, of course. Another symbol that we have is the kufiye. This have mainly been developed, like the kufiye, this headscarf, we have seen it before 1948 actually. The history behind it is actually that it used to be white, completely white, and when Arab revolutionists, they came into Palestine to fight against the Zionist movement and the British colony in Palestine, they were like well known that they had this kufi on their head or on their shoulders, and at that time it was very easy to for the British forces to recognize the fighters, the Arab fighters. So that's why in relation to that, the Palestinian people, they actually decided, in order to protect these Arab fighters, they decided that all people, they will wear this kufi in order to confuse the enemy. Throughout the years after 1948, it have developed with this pattern, and And we have seen Yasser Arafat, the first Palestinian leader, who wore it throughout his years, actually until he passed away. And I think also because of that, Yasser Arafat, his appearance were very well known with this kufiya. It also made it as a symbol for the Palestinians. It's something that is being used for all Palestinians in different aspects. You can see them in demonstrations, in weddings. People wear it for the everyday life, and it's also something that have been developed for or adopted by other countries who are fighting for freedom, like the Kurds and other also revolutionists, because it became actually a symbol of the revolutionary. And another way to for the Palestinians to develop the icons and the symbols were actually the stories from the grandparents. It was mainly second-hand stories that people got from the grandparents. And for example, today we have the most of the Palestinians. When I talk about Palestinians living in Denmark, they are Palestinians either born in Denmark or in Lebanon, and their parents are born in Lebanon as well. So it's actually their grandparents who were born in Palestine and have experienced the first years of their life in Palestine before they were forced out of their homes. So many of these stories was second-hand stories. Like many children, young Palestinians, they got actually a story from their parents that were told these stories from their own parents, from their grandparents. So it's this way where I mean the second-hand stories. And it was mainly the life before 48. It is being very romanticized that the life before 48, we had the freedom, it was nice, people loved each other, it was a beautiful country. It was a country where you're really had, where you live, where you talk about home and describe what home is actually. And it is actually through these ways that people also, like individually, they develop their own symbols. Especially the symbol about the key, the symbol about the right to return, that you miss your own land, that you miss your home. It's something that is being also delivered from generation to generation till today. And it's actually very important way. I would like to speak about a personal story. It's a story of a Palestinian. It's actually a story of my own grandfather. This is my own grandfather. He's born in Al Khalsa in northern in the northern part of the occupied Palestine, very close to the border to Lebanon in 1930. His name is Dahir Abdu Abu Dahir, and he were actually expelled from Palestine in May 11th, 1948. So he was actually 18 years old when he were expelled from his home with his own family. And today he's living in Shatila refugee camp in Beirut, in Lebanon. And his political status is that he is a stateless Palestinian. He had been living in a refugee camp for over 70 years, and he is still living there, even though that he had like his first 18 years of life in Palestine, and he remembers very well how Palestine looked and how it was to be there. And he have been describing it to many people who came to interview with him, and he have also told us the stories to his children, in this case my mother, and also I got these stories delivered. The I want to highlight one story, and it was actually for me personally. I was living in Palestine, and actually the first time I was working in Palestine in Ramallah and living there, and I lived also in Jerusalem before that. I went actually in 2013 to our uh, to our city. I went also to Palestine, to our city. I went to Al Khalsa. It's our village in northern Palestine. I went there one day. I went there one day with one of my friends, and actually I went there and I saw Palestine, and I saw my own village. I knew that there was a mosque there that were still remaining from before 1948, but basically everything else were destroyed, and there was like a new city. There were no Palestinians living there. It got a new name. It's not called Al Khalsa anymore. Now it's called Kiryat Shmone in Hebrew, and it's basically only Israelis living there. So I went there and tried to find things, places that can be something from before 48. And I was actually very excited. When I came back to Ramallah, came back home, I called my grandfather on the phone, and I told him, "Grandfather, I have been in Al Khalsa," and he was so excited. And he asked me about what I saw, and he told me like, "Did you see the mosque?" I said, "Yes, I saw it." And then he told me that there is a little river called Ain al-Dahab, the Golden Spring, that is going like very close to this mosque. And I told him, "Yes, I have seen it." And then he told me, "Okay, there's a little bridge over this river. Did you see the bridge?" I told him, "Yes, I saw it." And then he told me, "Okay, when you go cross the bridge, have you seen the cemetery?" I told him I didn't see any cemetery. Then he told me, "No, there's the cemetery. My parents, my grandparents are there. Our family have been buried there." And I was very confused because I didn't remember seeing anything. And after 2 weeks, I went back to the village again. I went there alone to find the cemetery. And then I found the mosque again, I found the bridge, I crossed the bridge, and what I saw was actually this. I realized that the park, that the cemetery have been removed, destroyed, and they have been making a park for children to play, and there are some things here where people play. And I was actually very sad about it because it was something that meant a lot to my grandfather. It meant a lot to my people. It is one of the very few memories that is remaining in Palestine. So when I got back, I actually avoided answering him that if I have seen the cemetery or not, because I would rather see him like I think that he will be very devastated if he knew what have been happening. And then I have been on a mission in 2017. I went back to this village, and before I went to this village, he asked me for a specific thing. And I would like to show you a video where you can see which mission I have been on, and I will get back to you again in a few minutes. Enjoy. Malik, they asked me Manning Kusin session, or they asked me Kusin session. الخالصة ويلنس. So come on, Simeon, justify Lebanon. Yes, thank you for welcome back. And actually, this is the bottle of water from Al Khalsa that my grandfather got, and it was actually the first time he got anything that reminds him of his own village. And you can see that actually the water was full, but he drank some of it. And then I told him not to drink anything of it because it may be dirty today. Before in the time they used to drink from this water, but I realized that it was actually dirty today. But it was something that meant a lot for my grandfather. It was actually the water, the river, Ain al-Dahab. It was the symbol for him that reminds him of home. And there are also other many things that reminds people of home in Palestine, for example. What I would like to highlight is, for example, Palestinians living in the West Bank. If they want to go to the sea, to Yafa, to Haifa, they need a military permit, and many cannot get it. And but when people get it, the first thing that people think about is actually to go to the sea and go to the beach. I'm sorry, to go to the sea and the beach and to explore and to see it because they don't have any other opportunities. And this is a very important symbol for Palestinians in Palestine. This may not be the symbol of Palestinians living in Lebanon or in Syria or in Europe, because we are not facing these difficulties. But this is actually my point, that people can um, speak, or people can develop, or are developing the symbols, the icons that relates them to their homeland in their own way. And this is actually something that we have seen throughout the years. uh, I would like to show you more art. I'm very sorry, that's my parrot. I would like to show you more art. This is Layla Khalid. She was actually a symbol of the female Palestinian freedom fighter. She was hijacking airplanes in order to get Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli prisons. And she got actually very famous, and this picture is a very iconic picture from Layla Khalid back in the days. And we have also other symbols or icons. It's actually the olive tree. When people talk about Palestine, they talk about olive oil, they talk about olives and the olive tree. It's something that relates people to Palestine, also because it's a very important production of the Palestinian agriculture. And for the people, it means a lot to them to have a Palestinian, to have an olive tree, to take care of the olive tree, to wait until October to harvest, for the olive harvest. And there is it's like a public festival, a folk festival, when we get into the olive harvest, where people wake up at 6-7 o'clock in the morning and harvesting the olives until afternoon, and eating together under the olive tree. This is very romantic, and it's actually a very nice experience for many people, where families gather together to do something together. Actually, this picture below is it's actually a picture of one of the oldest olive trees in Palestine. It's in Hebron, and it's approximately about 4,000 till 5,000 years old. And it's actually very close to the house of a family that I know who are living in Tel Urmeida, very close to the old city of Hebron. I would like to go back to the culture, to the arts for Palestine, and what it means to the Palestinians. We know that in Palestine, culture and art means a lot. I have showed you just a little corner of it. It's not everything. I maybe showed you 5% of the Palestinian culture and arts. But for the Palestinians in Palestine, it means a lot. We see that the Palestinians in Palestine, they have over 10,000 Rico, I'm sorry. We have in Palestine, there are over 10,000 cultural events in Palestine. This means that there are normally about 3 to 4 cultural events a day. I'm sorry. And this is also something that is very important. And this shows that Palestine and the Palestinians are still developing their own culture, their own arts, their own identity and symbols. I hope that you got something out of my presentation. I would like to thank you. Thank you all for your time, and see you next time.